Hello, 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 and welcome back to Coach's Corner. It is Monday, August 5th, and we are back with a brand new episode of Coach's Corner after a relatively slow weekend of sports. But that doesn't matter to us here. We do have stuff to talk about. We do have cheaters that are finally getting fully exposed. I'd say, it was highly speculative, and we kind of 95% were sure that things were happening, but we got the confirmation. And we look ahead to 2025 for potential new people in this certain building, certain people that deserve this honor. Either way, we'll talk about that coming up. But first things first, we have to talk about some football. I talked about the Hall of Fame game. I previewed a couple of the teams there, how I think they're going to do this this season upcoming. It's the Texans, it was the Bears, it was the Hall of Fame game, and it was the weird kickoff that we saw over the weekend. Obviously, that was just a tad bit, how to put it, off-putting. I mean, starting off a new rule in football, it was always kind of a funky thing because we don't know really how to take it because we're not used to it, and so we don't really know how to conceptualize it. We just always know what happened, and what happened was the kickoff was fine, but we weren't getting returns. So the idea is this to have more returns, less concussions, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, it's one of those things, it's a minor detail that we'll probably figure out during the season whether or not we hate it or not, and whether or not we'll go back to the old way. But until then, it's just something. But like I said, on the show, we talked about those teams. We talked about the Bears. We talked about the Texans. So, I thought it's almost football season. Preseason football really kicks off this week. Falcons play on Friday. Teams will be scattered around playing throughout the week. And so I feel like it's an appropriate time now to finally start talking some pigskin, start talking some, NFL football, previewing, looking out at the field and seeing what teams could do things. And so I figured, while we're talking about the Hall of Fame game teams, we kind of touched on the Texans. Why not just do the AFC South? Why not just talk Indianapolis Colts, Tennessee Titans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars? As you see in the background, I have my trusty Jaguars Justin Blackmon jersey hanging, but we'll get to them in a moment. First things first, the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Indianapolis Colts had a very, I'd say, tumultuous season. The word is weird, but the Indianapolis Colts had a weird season last year. Let's put it that way. Basically, they were very hopeful about a rookie quarterback they had. They hoped that they would get the same energy that C.J. Stroud gave the Texans. They hoped that it would go well, and it was for a couple of games until that just sturdy old shoulder just gave out, and unfortunately, he was done for the year pretty quickly. His season ended as soon as it started, and so Anthony Richardson had to be out for the year. But Gardner Minshew did lead the troops to a potential wildcard appearance, and they did not get there because C.J. Stroud and the Texans proved to be a pretty good opponent. But with all that being said, you don't look in the rear view, you look ahead. They did lose Gardner Minshew, but with that loss, they gained Anthony Richardson back this year. He is fully healthy heading into training camp. Obviously, he's been playing with the team. And frankly, this is a very interesting team where I feel like they have the potential to be a wild card team. They should be in that mix as they were just a year ago because, frankly, it's a lot of the same guys. It's a very similar team to what they had last year. It's a healthy mix of veterans along with rookies / young guys, DeForest Buckner there in the middle. Kwity Paye has been around for a while now. Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs. It's like a mix of these guys that have been in the league for about, 5-ish years. And then a lot of rookies and young guys as they're figuring out their way and kind of guess where to go from here. And Anthony Richardson's at the head of that. He's the head of the snake, obviously, because frankly, he's their entire future is built on what Anthony Richardson can give them. And so it's as simple as this for the Colts. If Anthony Richardson is unlocked, if he can stay healthy, if he proves to be a competent passer, because frankly, we still haven't seen it, the Colts can be a playoff team. Now, the issue is the AFC is a loaded conference, and we're going to get to that with these other teams here in a moment. And the Colts might just be the odd man out. And it might just be one of those years where you look towards development. You look towards development with a lot of your young guys. You look for A.D. Mitchell to step up and be wide receiver 2. You hope Josh Downs can settle into the slot there where I feel like he's the best suited to be. And granted, you're wasting Jonathan Taylor's prime years, but bigger picture, Jonathan Taylor is not going to be the focal point of your offense anymore. It should be Anthony Richardson. It should be, this dual threat attack with the pass and run the ball very well. It should be that. It shouldn't be Jonathan Taylor leading the charge like it has been, because the league isn't made with running backs that win you championships anymore. They're made with quarterbacks. And like I said, their defenses, I think, is underrated. Like I said, good front seven, I think. Experienced back end. Julian Blackmon stands out to me. I think this Colts team has a lot of names, a lot of players that can be contributors. But putting it all together right this moment, I can't say this is a playoff team. I'm sorry, Colts Nation. It's not time yet. But hopefully you get, I'd say, 16 games of Anthony Richardson. I think you would be very happy with. I think that should be the goal for Indianapolis. And, talking about teams that are really hoping for their young guys to step up and their young quarterback, the Tennessee Titans are the next team that I want to talk about, because the Tennessee Titans, I feel like, are a team that's kind of in no man's land right now. They have no real path to go towards right now. And that feels weird saying that about a team that did just draft a quarterback last year and just hired a head coach this previous offseason. But frankly, we don't know a lot about either of them, because Will Levis was ingrained in, a Mike Vrabel-led team, and it looked like he was the guy. He played very well towards, I think, in spots against the Falcons, against the Dolphins. Will Levis was impressive in his moments. But now he's getting a new head coach in, and does that new head coach benefit him? Does he hurt him? And it's the Bengals offensive coordinator, for those who don't know. And frankly, we just don't know a lot about the guy. And I would say it's kind of similar to when Zach Taylor did go to Cincinnati, where, frankly, you want to hope that an offensive guy that coming from that system would come in and have that immediate success that a lot of those guys have, but you just really don't know. You don't know because you don't know whether Will Levis is truly good or not. So the Titans are just in a rudderless ship kind of spot where they're spinning in circles in the ocean, and they're really just kind of hoping that they can see something. And, where I think the Colts have a lot more of established veterans and established players on their roster, I don't think the Titans have that. They have that same kind of hope where it's a young head coach that they just got, and it's a young quarterback heading into his second year that we haven't seen a full season from. So they're very similar, but I think the floor is just higher for the Colts, where the Titans, and they drafted an offensive lineman, and their receiving core hasn't really been anything special since A.J. Brown left, because now DeAndre Hopkins is hurt. And, it's one of those things where I feel like one thing after another for the Titans, where they have players, they have, a number of guys that are talented. But right now, it's just like where you're starting. And, are they handcuffed? Are they playing with, their hand tied behind their back right now because DeAndre Hopkins is hurt and Derrick Henry just left? So I think the Titans are just searching for an identity. And I think finding that identity this year is really where they're going to begin to kind of figure out how to piece this thing back together and potentially be a playoff team again. That means for me this year, they're not close to being a playoff team. And like I said, I like the Titans. They've been a steady organization that just really hasn't gotten over the hump because, frankly, they've just been a team of good players, not great players. So I think they're kind of just trying to figure out who's going to be the guys that stick around. Who is Brian Callahan going to be the head coach for them? Is Will Levis the guy? Everyone loves a good old, is he the guy type of talk when it comes to quarterbacks. That's what the Titans are going to face this year, and we'll see how they handle that adversity. But speaking of the guy, a team that knows who their guy is, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, I've talked about him in the past couple episodes, was he got paid big time. And so that pressure is now here. And I feel like it's safe to say last year was the most disappointing year, I think, in their past 5 years, I'd say. It's one of those things where it's the Jaguars. What do you really expect? But coming off of a year where you made the playoffs, you won a playoff game, went to Kansas City, was competitive for the most part. I think against a hobbled Mahomes, but either way, you came back last year and frankly did not live up to the expectations. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They brought in Christian Kirk. They spent a lot of money on that defense, and none of it really came to show when they needed it the most towards that end stretch where they were leading the AFC. They were the number one seed in the AFC at one point last season. As quickly as that was gone, as quickly was their playoff hopes vanished because, frankly, they had a chance to make the playoffs in week 17, but they lost. So now with a retooled offense, because they did draft Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, who I like, they did bring in Gabe Davis to replace Calvin Ridley. And that's frankly, they have one of the best offensive lines in the league. I didn't even realize it until I looked at their roster. A lot of really good talent there, especially if Anton Harrison, their second-year tackle, comes on strong and continues. I really like what they have. That's his brother. Travis Etienne, the running back, broke out last year, I think, finally in a role that suited him where he kind of did the, catch the ball enough or he ran the ball enough. I felt like they figured him out maybe a little bit more. Christian Kirk, like I said, is I think underrated piece for them on offense. But I do think their defense is really the most underrated aspect of this team. They have young guys on all three levels that I think are good right now. Andre Sisco, the safety out of Syracuse, is really coming into his own. Trayvon Walker, I've talked about him before. Joshua Hines Allen, I believe is what he's going by now. He's really good, and they brought in a veteran, Eric Armstead from San Francisco. So if that guy can be the piece that kind of brings it all together, I think this Jaguars team can be super, super interesting in a way that they haven't been since that AFC Championship year where they brought in Calais Campbell, and that guy kind of just brought the whole defense together. And I'm not saying this Jaguars defense will be that caliber because that was an unbelievable defense, but I feel like Eric Armstead is the type of veteran presence to come in and kind of, bring that attention to where those other guys can just free run and eat. And so, frankly, I love the Jaguars coming into this season. It's one of those things where I just blindly believe in Trevor Lawrence to bring this offense up. I think he's going to be healthy for the first time in a while. I think Doug Peterson will be a good, he's still there, steady coach. Sometimes you just need a steady hand holding it. And I like the Jaguars to win this division because, like I said, last year they were right there in position to win it. But then the Texans kind of, took the rug out from under them, won a lot of games late and beat Indianapolis to win the division. And like I said, frankly, I don't think the Colts are quite there yet. I think in another year of Anthony Richardson, Titans, like I said, they need to find an identity. The Texans, it's one of those things where they played so above their talent level, I think, last year. I think they're bound for just a little bit of regression because I feel like they are also a popular pick for people. And, it just feels weird picking the Jaguars as the team I like in this division. But just if you look at every position group, I think every position group on this team has a guy. And I think that's kind of lost here where I don't know if the Texans defense will be the same as they were last year, despite how good CJ Stroud could be. So, with all that being said, I feel like you obviously know my pecking order here is going to be the Jaguars 1, Texans 2, Colts, and then the Titans. So, that is the AFC South. That is our quick little run through of the division. We're going to try and keep going through those weekly here, or I guess daily now. We're going to go through the rest of the AFC this week and so on, so forth. But we got to talk some college football. Let's get some college football talk here because that season is coming up quickly. But going about off the field, the Michigan Wolverines were a very highly discussed team last year because of Connor Stalions. And if you don't know Connor Stalions, he's somehow been under a rock. He's the guy that was stealing signs from other teams. And basically it came out, the documents were released that it came out that he was on the sidelines of certain teams. He was stealing signs, and him and now Michigan head coach Sharon Moore had exchanged 52 text messages. And, I'm not one to point at text messages and be like, that's the end all be all. He's guilty. But in a situation I think as delicate as this in college sports, where basically Connor Stalions was the fall guy, one way or another. 52 text messages isn't, particular like, hey, I just got your number from a friend. I'm helping you here, and it's like, okay, it was a one-off text, but no, this feels like a relationship that there's no escaping from. Michigan. This feels like a situation that will be dealt with swiftly and harshly because of the fact that it is Michigan who also won the national championship. And, the Kentucky Wildcats just got punished in not a bad way, but I mean, I guess any punishment isn't a bad way, but like they didn't get the death penalty, but sanctions were filed against them for a couple, infractions here and there, and I'd say they're pretty good on the punishment there. I feel like it's got to be stronger in this case, just because of, like I said, it's the context around this. And I think it's a fair point to say that this happens on every team. There is probably some crazy booster super fan that is stealing signs and trying to help his team out. But the thing is not all those teams get caught. And so you have to, come with swift action. Otherwise, there will be 134 Connor Stallions for every team. That's just something the NCAA does not want to deal with because it'll just be a headache. So I don't know what kind of penalty the NCAA can, or I don't know what governing body is enforcing a penalty on Michigan, but it feels like something's got to happen to where it's harsh enough to where teams don't want just any random guy getting field passes to go steal signs for the other team. So we're going to see how that situation unfolds. It's been obviously a long time coming, or not long time coming, but we've been awaiting some more word, I think, from this whole situation because it was all kind of funky when it came out and hadn't heard about it in a while. But now, just a couple months or weeks prior to the season, the head coach now in hot water with Michigan. So we'll see if he just ends up being a scapegoat. They get him out of there, but it's not pretty right now. And this is kind of, we kind of touching on all levels of football. There's the Olympics are going on right now, so NBA stuff's quiet. It really is just those guys playing basketball. The MLB, obviously the season is happening. We're kind of seeing it unfold. So we're just kind of ramping up the football season here, and you're going to see me really kind of hammer home the football points here. We did touch on the NFL, obviously, college game just now. But let's talk some legacy. Let's talk some Hall of Fame football. Let's talk over the weekend teams or players were celebrated as they were inducted in the Hall of Fame. And there were some notable modern names like Patrick Willis, a guy who I do remember watching, Devin Hester, who did play for my Falcons, Andre Johnson from the Texans, who once again I remember is a very underrated player, and then Julius Peppers, who was the only guy that was first ballot Hall of Fame. And so this world is fast-paced. The news cycle consistently cycles through, and we constantly have to, be ready for what's next. And so that's what we're going to do here in the 2025 Hall of Fame, which we won't even know about until February next year. We got some notable names that will be coming up down the pipeline of guys who might be in the Hall of Fame first ballot. And just a couple of the names that I think should be first ballot, and this is just purely my opinion. It's offensive linemen, because offensive linemen, I feel like, are the rocks of the NFL. Really, if you're an all-time great, you don't hear about them very often. They're just doing their job. Like any good offensive lineman, the more you don't know about them, the better. And frankly, two guys that I think should be first ballot Hall of Famers that are offensive linemen. Out of the three guys, I have two of them offensive linemen. Marshall Yanda with the Ravens for so long, plenty of statistical, first team, Pro Bowl, all that type of stuff. I'm pulling up his Wikipedia now. Marshall Yanda kind of retired early. He's 39 years old right now. He's kind of crazy. He's been retired that long, but he's, I think, one of the best guards, if not the best guard of this century. Him, Zach Martin, I think 1-2, probably the best guys. He went to college in North Iowa area CC for his first couple years. Then he went to Iowa. He's a Super Bowl champion, a 2-time first team All-Pro, 5-time second team All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler, All-Decade Team, Baltimore Ravens Ring of Honor, and second team All-8 Big Ten. And so like I said, unbelievable player. Frankly, one of the better guards I think the game has ever seen. Um, but then we go to another guy who I also think is severely underrated just because he played for, I'd say, a tough team, a team that really didn't get good until he was later in his career. And that is Joe Staley. Joe Staley, who is also 39, fun fact, is from Central Michigan. He was a first round pick. But his statistics or his little awards here 3-time second team All Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, and he is also on that All Decade team. He played in 181 games, started in all of them. So one of those guys where he's just kind of an Iron Man, just quietly, like you do. Like I said, the more you don't hear about offensive linemen, the better they are. And Joe Staley, I feel like, is one of those consummate guys that's he's just really good at what he does. And he probably didn't get a lot of recognition because he was also in an era with another first ballot guy, Joe Thomas. Trent Williams is the modern guy, like a tough kind of time for him to be in the NFL, but nonetheless, unbelievable player. And then the third guy that I think should be an automatic first ballot Hall of Famer, Terrell Suggs, a mean edge rusher off the edge from Minnesota, played his ball in Arizona State. He was a 2-time Super Bowl champion, an NFL Defensive Player of the Year, NFL Rookie of the Year, a first-team All-Pro, second-team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. He's a forced fumbles leader in that Defensive Player of the Year year. He's in the Ring of Honor for Baltimore, Lombardi Award, Ted Hendricks Award. His career highlights are very long on Wikipedia, if you don't get the point. So, unbelievable player. I think he is definitely on that first ballot list where he just should be in there. Now, like I said, I think one of the two offensive linemen probably won't make it first ballot because they just don't get the recognition. But that should happen. But another thing about this is that it's made it such a hot topic that I've seen or I've heard talked about, like on the 680, the Fan radio station, 680, 93.7 FM, the Fan. We're talking about Eli Manning. And I go back and forth because as much as I don't like Eli Manning and I don't think he is a Hall of Famer, I come back to thinking about his place in NFL history and does he deserve to be a Hall of Famer? And although he is a part of those years where he defeated Tom Brady twice, he stopped 2 more Tom Brady Super Bowls, unbelievable playoff runs. He's statistically up there in the top 10s and whatnot because he played so long. He is a part of that legendary draft class with Ben Roethlisberger, Phil Rivers. As much as I don't think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, he should be a Hall of Famer. But it feels like one of those things where he's a Hall of Famer in 10 years where we can really appreciate it and be like, he wasn't in the Hall of Fame already? He's just, if you watched him, he's just not that guy. Outside of those years, and really not even those years, those playoff runs, you can't point to him and tell me he was ever a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He just wasn't. So as much as it feels weird, it's definitely because of the last name that he's going to be recognized in history, and he's not going to be lumped along with the, Carson Palmers or Derek Carrs of the world. Eli Manning being a first ballot Hall of Famer I feel like it is a slap in the face to the Hall of Fame. Like I said, he probably is one of those Hall of Famers, but couple years down the road, not a first ballot guy. And, there are some notable names that I do have to mention that are, I think in the running there for first ballot guys. Luke Kuechly, probably the best linebacker I've seen from start to his career to the end of his career. He retired early, kind of Andrew Luck style. Unbelievable player. Clay Matthews kind of had a weird, I'd say he wasn't as much on the scene as long as he probably would like to be, but Clay Matthews was a force to be reckoned with when he did play. Earl Thomas, the same way from the safety position, a big part of that Legion of Boom. I thought he was always the best player in the Legion of Boom because I thought Cam Chancellor was, the big thumper. Richard Sherman was okay in zone, but I feel like Earl Thomas really was the key that kind of could do anything that you asked of him. I feel like he probably should be a Hall of Famer at some point. Aqib Talib, a cornerback for the Rams and Broncos and probably a couple other teams. Felt like he was really good in his era where, you didn't really hear a lot about him. And it's just because he was a really good man corner. Just played for a while. Good deserving player, I feel like, down the road. And then Vernon Davis, he is kind of I'd say before his time a little bit, where he's that vertical threat, where I felt like you was really seeing him eat. He was one of those like Antonio Gates, where I feel like Antonio Gates would have been unbelievable in today's NFL. He was probably 5 years too early, and he still did amazing things for the game. Vernon Davis feels in that very similar vein, where 5 more years he would have, 5 more years later, he would have been unbelievable, and maybe he would be up there in that GOAT tight end conversation. I think just underrated player, I feel like, for what he was good at. So just a couple guys I think are pretty good. So with all that being said, that'll do it for me. A little bit of a longer Coach's Corner, 10 minutes longer than it has been normally, but we have finally some football to talk about, some football to get into, preview before we get to week 0 of college football, and we're just full-fledged in this thing. But with all that being said, I'm your host, Lucas Coach Farm. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.